for the City of Evans, Colorado. First item on the agenda, Tuscany non-potable irrigation. We'll hear from you, Jim.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the City Council. This item has been quite a while in the works, and I know that you're all fairly familiar with the basics. The last time the City Council had a work session on this item was the summer of 2017. At that time, you kind of gave some preliminary approval for a model that could help move this project along with the city's assistance, the city fronting the cost for the project and then being paid back through user charges and building fees up front. At that meeting, you asked staff to go out and have some conversations with the neighborhood about their interests in the project and some of the details of how we could structure that surcharge. So that's what we have for you this evening. I will give a little bit of a background since I know we do have some new council members, but I'll go pretty quickly in the interest of time for our overall work session tonight. So let me just hit these. So from the start, it's important to remember when we're talking about one neighborhood, I think what our overall public purpose and city benefit is for this project. And as council has talked about in the past, water conservation is critical for us in terms of both our current development, but also finding potential water for the future. This project is certainly the most ripe of our large non-potable irrigation projects that's all set to go. We estimate that at build out for Tuscany, which now as council knows, we have really the last large projects in the pipeline. We estimate that Tuscany will use about 100 acre feet of potable water for irrigation if we don't have a non-potable irrigation solution. So that is significant for us. Also, in terms of dollars, we have a provision in our contract that the city of Greeley that says when we reach a certain threshold of water use, it's based on our last high point of water consumption. When we reach that potable threshold, we need to pay approximately $20,000 per acre foot of additional water that we need treated. And that's a real motivation to look at how we can strategically delay those costs. We know at some point with growth we're going to go over that threshold, but our goal is certainly to ensure that the new growth can pay for as much of that capacity charge as we can. And while we don't know for sure when we're going to hit that threshold, we do feel that if we can take 100 acre feet of our potable use to non-pot, that gives us some more breathing room, more of the growth can happen. We can bring in more of those system development charges and likely pay off most of the next cap hit or threshold charge to Greeley with new development dollars instead of our current ratepayers. We can thereby avoid any rate hits for that purpose. So that's really the big picture city purpose for moving forward with this project, conserve water and delay those charges and the impact on our residents. In addition, we know that this has been a long-term dispute between lots of different parties, the city included, with the neighborhood regarding disappointments and misinformation about the non-potable system in Tuscany. Houses in the streets are plumbed for it, but they just don't have the main infrastructure for that system. This would help us to take care of that issue. And then residents who would receive the non-potable water, of course, would pay those lower rates, which has been the desire for most of the residents for some time. And as you'll see here, about 58% of households would see savings in the first year. And then after about 5 years, even more of the houses that don't use much water, up to 75% of those those households would see annual benefit cost savings after the first 5 years. That's in a nutshell the benefits or the purpose. To hit the background, developer went bankrupt, left the infrastructure for the non-potable water unfinished. The houses have the dual plumbing, they're ready for the system, but we need to build out the main basin pond that would supply the non-potable water system. After the developer left, but more than 10 years ago, the city did a cutover from its potable system and has been using water from the city's water portfolio to supply irrigation needs for Tuscany, so essentially to water lawns. So we've been able to help out with that. We've had in our conversations with the neighborhood, we've stressed and shown them the documents where the system was intended and was approved to be private for the neighborhood without city involvement. But there we found ourselves, and the city had stepped in to ensure that the folks living there could water their lawns. One of the sticking points has been that neither the HOA nor the city owns the parcel on which that non-potable system is intended to be built. TrackDoe is what you'll hear that called. And we've had to negotiate with that property owner. I know that it's been many years, and you'll hear the tentative agreement to acquire that property tonight. As I mentioned up front, a couple years ago when the council talked, they expressed some willingness to front the cost for the system out of the city's water fund, provided that in the end, the users of the system who benefit directly from the system would pay for that system through either upfront building fees or a surcharge for residents over time. And then you can just see that shifting to non-pot in Tuscany could help us save on future treatment costs. This just shows, I'll point you to the bar graph in the far right bar, the comparison between potable water costs and non-potable water costs. If you take an average outdoor water use, you can see that the savings, is that total or for the season? For the month of July. So this is just 1 month example. Difference between potable and non-potable rate. The cost is less, half or actually less than half of the charge for potable water. So that's the benefit to residents. And this just makes a similar case. Kaylin, who's done a whole lot of work on this, I do want to give her some credit for the analysis and work that you're seeing here. We looked at the actual bills for all the households in Tuscany as of late 2017. That's what you're seeing numbers for tonight. But you'll just see that looking at the line graph on the right, the various tiers of potable use, those are if the costs in the future go up at a rate similar to the costs of the past 10 years, so we just kind of modeled that. You can see each of those dotted and dashed lines where the potable water charges will be in 5, 10, 15 years. And then the bottom solid line is the cost for the non-potable water over time. And you can see how that savings over time we anticipate will likely only grow to be more savings as the costs of the rate at which potable water costs go up is faster than the non-pot. So looking at the actual users, the bottom line of this slide, in the interest of time, is that we looked at high water users at kind of the 95th percentile of all the actual users, the medium and the low. So the medium is that 50th percentile. And you can see that, especially for high water users who use a lot of water, they're paying that Tier 1 and Tier 2 rates for their irrigation. There's a lot of savings to be had, approximately, as we're showing, $418 for the season. And then you can see from medium users and low users, the number's less, but it's still significant savings that could be realized by paying non-potable water. So what's the project that we're talking about? You see the picture there, the tract with the blue, which shows the ponds, is TrackDoe, where the system will be located. And then you see the rest of Tuscany, including the parcels in Tuscany that are still to be developed. The total project cost that would be assessed to users is $1.3 million. And that's comprised of the components that you'll see up top, which I'll walk through in a moment. I wanted to show the costs at the bottom as well, because those are additional city costs. Some of the comment that we've heard from some neighbors has been, the city had some hand in kind of the way this all evolved with Tuscany approvals and all of that, and the city will see some benefit from delaying those capacity charges to Greeley. The city should be paying for part of this project, perhaps more than we're showing here. But I just wanted to show the indirect costs that are built in that aren't part of the assessed costs. You see, if we front this project and just making some assumptions about when repayments will be made and the interest costs that the city could forego, there's approximately $115,000 of foregone interest cost that we could be making if we had that money in the bank. And then the water price gap, you'll see up above the $417,000 for water. We've modeled that water in the top half that we're going to charge out to residents at the 2002 rate. We're proposing, hey, let's meet you halfway. Instead of charging nothing, saying, oh, we'll just cover it like we've been doing, or saying we're going to charge you today's rate for water. Our assumption in that top half is, okay, if Tuscany had brought the water to the city, dedicated water for the non-pot system, it would have probably been acquired at that something like the 2002 rate, which we have gone back into the GLIC records, and that's about $417,000, which is what they would have had to pay back then for that water. Jump down to the bottom, the water price gap, that's what we think would be the difference if the city is now to make up that water cost over time. We wouldn't have to do it immediately, but in today's costs for water, there's about $333,000, so $448,000 is the total indirect cost that the city could be absorbing to complement that cost from the users of the system. This just shows Tuscany. You can see the green is single-family homes. That's the largest constituency and the largest user group. When you hear us talk about the HOA in shorthand, it's the group of homes represented directly by those, by the green properties there. You can see that the city there's a couple different purples there, but the one that's a little bluer is the city parks. So the city has a stake in this irrigation. The city would save some money on irrigating our parks. We have about 4% of the project there. The HOA itself. You can see Ann K. Hyman School. That's a big stakeholder in this project. We have worked with them and shown them this model. They're very supportive. They see that they will see cost savings down the line from their irrigation. Then you see Monte Vista Apartments, and then the two parcels that are south of Monte Vista are at the corner, the undeveloped, which in this graphic is called commercial. That's now planned unit development, based on the zoning actions council took for the Villaggio project. And then you see the beige color is the undeveloped multifamily, which we currently have a project in process in the pipeline for the western half of that parcel. So that's who's involved when we talk about the repayment plans. The cost allocation, you just see how that, we'd used a really simple, kind of straightforward square footage allocation of cost here. So based on the last slide where you showed the allocation of land area, this shows the allocated cost, how we divvy up the 1.3 million among the various users. You see the city does have about $56,000 that it would have to pay in. The HOA also has a similar amount. School district would pay $140,000 into the project. And then the single family HOA group would pay $577,000. Multifamily, I won't read all the numbers there. And then I think it is important to see at the bottom that the two future developments would also pay their shares. So the bottom, the undeveloped commercial, that's the Villaggio project. The owners of that parcel own TrackDoe, and we're going to talk in a minute about TrackDoe. They would also be paying their share, $128,000 into the project, aside from any transaction to acquire TrackDoe. Then you see on the right side, the cost per unit. You can just see when we break down the single family by the number of houses or units, it's $1,900 approximately. The multifamily units are $1,200, and those are duplexes, triplexes, and then the Monte Vista condos is $712 per unit. So we've shown all of this to the various HOA groups. When we met with the school district, they saw the surcharge method that they were looking at, but they said, hey, would you be open to a 5% discount on the amount owed if we did it all in one, if we paid for that up front? When we ran the numbers, said, yeah, it's more worth it to us to have that money back in our fund, earning interest, than it is to have it paid out over time. So we do have the total unit cost for the various residential groups there. We have a 15-year monthly surcharge that the HOA itself said, if we're going to do this, that sounds fair to us. And then we have that upfront 5% discount that we propose we offer anybody who wants to pay this amount upfront. Let's see. So then we go into that cost. You see that this is for an average single family home, the $1,912 total cost per property. The annual cost over 15 years is $127, and that would be spread out over all months in the water bill. And then you see the table to the right shows the savings for those various water user categories: high water, medium water user, and low water. If you look at the low water, or let's just focus on that middle, the 50% level, they would actually about break even, but see a little bit of cost savings in the first year, and that savings grows over time, over the 5 and 10 year time frames. Then I will point out the low water user, since they're only using a little bit of potable water, they're not going to have that much non-potable water. So their savings is actually, they don't see savings till that surcharge is paid off and the surcharge goes away. Then, of course, they'll see savings because they only have the non-potable water. But in the near term, they would see a little bit of cost just because they're not using as much water. So, at the bottom level, based on our best modeling, we think more than half of households would see savings in year one, and then after year 5, there'd be about 75% of households seeing savings. Let's go back for a moment. Got on a roll there. I do want to talk about the various components of the system. The non-pot design and construction, that's based on an independent third-party engineering study that we had done in early 2017. That assessed the condition of what's there on TrackDoe now, and kind of did some high-level costing for what it would take to build out the system, and so that $578,000 includes the cost to design the system, clean up the site, which is estimated to be about $75,000, and then build the system. And there is a pretty significant contingency in that number because those numbers are a couple years old now, and we really haven't designed the system, so we don't, we'll acknowledge that those costs are yet to be refined. The non-pot conveyance and carriage, we do have a plan at this point. It's hard to see on this slide, but Mike Wiedemann is a farmer who owns a line extension from the Greeley Loveland Irrigation Company, or GLIC ditch. The original plan for this non-potable system assumed that the city would be able, or not the city, I'll be very careful, that the HOA would be able to use his line to deliver water to the non-potable system on TrackDoe. We have had successful negotiations with Mr. Wiedemann, and we have a carriage agreement that he has signed, ready to go. We have agreed to do some minor repairs with him on the line. The $50,000 in the model would only be used if needed, but we're also talking to him about potentially purchasing that line. He's moved to more of a drip irrigation system, and he isn't irrigating the way he was. Might make sense for the city to purchase that line so that we have control of it and responsibility for it. So that's that item. Scoot back here. We talked about the water. Now let's talk about TrackDoe for a moment. The value of TrackDoe and the question of who should acquire TrackDoe, I know has been going on for a long time. I've been engaged with that for a couple years now. I know that the city had been approached several years ago where the owners, DG Holdings, had been insisting on something in the ballpark of $400,000 or more. They, just for the background, not that it's the city's obligation to compensate for their business loss, but based on the records that we've seen and their perspective, they received TrackDoe along with the other parcel on the corner as part of the bankruptcy settlement in order to pay off contractor liens for the stormwater system that's on TrackDoe, which serves all of Tuscany. They've had to pay between $600,000 to $1 million in terms of contractor liens, interest penalties, and taxes. The number you can look at varies, but I think it's probably in that range. So they had been looking for some time for a number that gets them closer to what they had put in that project. We have been talking, and on the other end of the spectrum, there's probably the value of just the land that's there. All parties have agreed it's a parcel that doesn't lend itself well to traditional property appraisal because of the lack of access, the fact that there's really only a couple buyers for it. And so, the approach that we're recommending and that the property owner, DG Holdings, has bought into is that we would simply look at the cost per the court records of what it took to build the stormwater infrastructure on TrackDoe, which is large pipes and pumps and things like that. which was about $412,000, near as we can tell. And then we've depreciated that to 2019. So using a standard accounting practice to get to the value today, and we've arrived at $257,000 for to acquire the stormwater assets, but also the rest of TrackDoe. As you'll note, there's significant disagreement with that approach from the Tuscany HOA, and I'll comment on that at the end. But that's how we've arrived at $257,000. I'll be the first to say it's not precise, but it is a way I think that's reasonable based on an objective methodology that, if council chooses, would help us to move forward on this project. One other component, along as part of that bankruptcy, DG Holdings was granted one share of Seven Lakes Water. The city has known about this share for some time, as it had been earmarked for Tuscany, although it's owned by DG Holdings. So they, of course, they don't have any other real purpose for it. They would like to sell it to us. It would have limited value on the market. They could potentially sell it, but it would have limited value on the market because it cannot be changed for municipal use, and it doesn't have what they say, what they call dry up provisions on the water deed. If it had those things and it could be changed for municipal use, our contract water engineer, Doug Seeley, and the GLIC folks would say that that could be worth about $150,000. But based on their records and their expertise, they've advised that it's probably worth about $90,000 to us. So this is, what I believe would be a pretty good fit to help us start to make up some of the water. There is charges for the water coming back. If we acquired this water, it's about 20% or so of the water to make the project whole. So it's probably a good first step, but that's part of the recommendation as well. So quick look at the cash flow. If we do front the project, you can see that there's about $750,000 in this year's budget for this project. We anticipate we could use approximately $525 of it in this year. That would be for TrackDoe cleanup, the non-potable system design, water carriage, and the purchase. And then also the water purchase and also TrackDoe land purchase. You can see that we're anticipating, based on conversations with the school district and the development that's being approved, we anticipate that we could start seeing significant amounts of that outlay coming back to us in 2020, because any new development and the school district would be paying upfront, would be paying in the short term, which really in 2021 and through 2015 or 15 years, we're assuming that only the existing residential would be paying back the surcharge rate at 1/15 of that per year. So it's really a simple mathematical calculation. So we would have just that amount remaining at the end of 2 years, and then that would be paid down over the duration of that 15-year purpose or period. It's community engagement. I think the council's aware we've had numerous meetings with the Tuscany HOA board and with the HOA as a whole. We've met with Monte Vista, met with school district a couple times, and the owners of TrackDoe. We've also had, we presented this to your water and sewer board a couple months ago, and they were enthusiastically supportive of conserving water and kind of, I think, closing the loop on this long-term project. I do want to be as objective as I can with council. You'll see letters in the packet, both one from last week from the HOA that said, a majority of the residents would like to see this go forward. However, we have some questions. After that letter came in, Kaylin and I met with the HOA one more time. Apparently, and I think we answered many of their questions, they still disagreed with the value of TrackDoe and that the city isn't able to just buy this, pay for it outright. Those are two things that they would like to be different. Today at approximately noon, I received another letter, follow-up, along with a quite extensive a property appraisal from a licensed appraiser whom the HOA hired, I will say without the city or DG Holdings input, but they completed an appraisal that we just got that report from them today. It's fairly critical of our approach, and has its own conclusion about value that it's more like $126,000. So I had told the HOA that I would be as candid with you about their objections as I can, and I believe the value that we're proposing for TrackDoe and the fact that the city isn't paying more for the project or paying for it outright for them are probably their two biggest concerns. Have another letter from one of the partners of DG Holdings, David Jansen, who expressed his frustration on the other end that they've been, providing stormwater services to all of Tuscany that they paid for more than a decade, and that they're not feeling appreciated in the compensation level that we're offering. But they're willing to go forward at the $257,000 rate, even though they claim that it's not it's certainly a loss for them. Again, I'm not drawing judgments on either of those perspectives, but I wanted to bring that to council. With that, I will recap benefits, water savings for the city, delaying the capacity charges to Greeley, potentially paying that in the future, several years down the road with new development instead of current ratepayers. And I think closing the loop on this long-term dispute and delivering lower irrigation water rates for the lion's share of the Tuscany neighborhood. Sorry for my long-windedness, Mayor,
Okay,
but
Jim,
that's
thank you.
the overview there, and we'd certainly like your direction tonight. Any more questions? We're poised with council's direction to bring back those action items, the purchase of the land and the water and the carriage agreement, and get started on this on the project with our goal still of having this operational for next summer for the residents, which we getting a little tight, but we think we can do it. So with that, I conclude.
Questions, comments for
I
Jim?
would like to know how this ditch system is proposed on working. Are you thinking that you're gonna fill a pond, which I don't think is legal, and then pump it to the citizens? Because the east side is based off of, more gravity, opening gates and gravity, and not an
Right.
actual system where it's pushing it through.
Right.
So how is this system going to work? I think that has a lot to do with, some of the other questions we might have.
Well, from a water carriage standpoint, the rights, the decree for the Seven Lakes ditch water is for irrigation on that Tuscany property. It can be used for that purpose. So it would be our intent to deliver that water from the GLIC main line south through Wiedemann's, currently Wiedemann's pipe, to the ditch and then pump it to the households.
So you're proposing that we're going to build a pump station?
Correct.
A water collection area and then a pump station?
We would use the existing stormwater and series of ponds that's actually on that TrackDoe and was initially set up for that. The southernmost pond is currently the one in use for stormwater. That pond would be used for both stormwater and non-pot. the ponds to the north would also be incorporated into the non-potable water system.
I just, because reading the letter from the Tuscany, you know, they had their concerns about how the other ditch system, the one we currently have, is running, and again, it's not a pump station.
For the current Evans ditch
Right.
users,
Right.
correct.
Right.
We do have some pumps for some of the other non-potable
Great.
systems if the water decree allows for that.
Other questions, concerns?
Well, it's a compromise after 18 years, and then not everybody's gonna be satisfied with it, but I think it will benefit the current residents of Tuscany in the long run and the city, and we should proceed with it, because I've been listening, this has been one of the biggest thorns in Tuscany's side for over 18 years, and the city, because they wanted the city to provide it. And in the first years of this discussion, I always thought that the city had promised to provide that. Or that's what I was always told. But now I find out that it was a private development. And I hope that in future developments, we don't allow any more of this privatization of the non-pot system to eliminate this kind of problem.
Laura, do you have more?
The continuation of what I had. So you're proposing that we're buying this property, the city is going to build it, and then we're going to be maintaining it.
Correct. To the native grass, it will not be built out as an active park at all. We envision a walkway potentially through there with the grass maintained at the native grass service level that we've adopted now.
And just my major concern is, in the past 2 years since we discussed this originally, I'm just questioning on the city's capability of maintaining this once we have it built. I, again, don't see that we have the capabilities of maintaining it in a way that would keep it appealing and functioning. I also concerned, and you had said something about the carrying rights in the line through the Wiedemans. I know that his property's for sale, so that's always a concern on getting the water to us. If, you know, the property sells, we can have an agreement with him, but the water coming in perpetuity might be a little questionable. And again, I just wanted to express that my concern was, if we're putting that up, and how are we going to maintain that for them?
I think he's very interested if we're willing to our purchase of that line. So I think pending direction here, we'll be moving in that direction, and it would fit within this budget.
And the budget for maintaining it?
$50,000 would allow for the purchase of that line. It would cost less than that, we think. We're trying to leave some room there. But that would be our hope.
And I'm concerned about maintaining the pump stations and the property there. Are we going to have to hire someone else to do that?
Well,
Another employee? Are you thinking that it's within the realm of what we currently have? Or it just doesn't seem it's possible that we can get that done with what we have?
in the bigger picture, we are maturing our non-potable water utility. The purpose of having the rate that we do is for maintenance and operation of those systems. So we now have 4 to 5 public systems, including the Evans Ditch, within that non-potable utility. I think this system will not put us over the top, but I do think that as other systems come on and as we see more development and we have more fee revenue coming in from the non-potable services, we will need to think about staffing levels and growing that into a more defined utility like our water and sewer systems.
Jim, with us stepping in to kind of help finance this project, and it's being returned from the private sector to the city to maintain it.
Correct.
Which I think will greatly benefit the residents there, because obviously the private part of this project 18 years ago was unviable and has caused a lot of problems for both the city and the residents, past and current.
I think my primary concern would just be making sure we do our due diligence in responding to the concerns of the HOA. I think as a resident of Tuscany, we hear the concerns and I'm aware of those, but I would like to be, as a resident, excluding my role here, would like to be aware of the city's response to that. I think it would be beneficial for the neighborhood, because my primary concern is they hear one side, but they don't fully understand the whole picture. And I think if we as a city can ensure that we're doing our due diligence, it will make it go a lot smoother. So I think there's already just such disdain in the neighborhood over the whole situation that as much as we can show that we're doing the best for our residents, and I believe we are, then it would be really advantageous for the city.
While I share the concerns that Laura has and the points that Amanda brought up, I am in favor of going forward with this project. It benefits the entire city as a whole. And the main selling point there for me is that $2.1 million for 100 acre feet of water if we go over a cap. That's not only shared by the Tuscany, but it's shared by the entire city. And I don't feel the people in my ward and in the surrounding communities that don't live in Tuscany want to pay any more money than they have to, because they already complain the water bills are too high. The rest of us don't want to share that burden when we go over the cap because we failed to do this project. I understand the concerns and the questions and everything brought up by the people in Tuscany. I absolutely get it. But looking at the overall beneficial picture, it benefits the city. I don't want to pay, my constituents don't want to pay any more money than they have to. And I think this $2.1 million a year in potential savings for this project is definitely worth us pursuing it.
And I think really we've got a strong amount of people in favor of the project within the neighborhood because of that. I think, we all have insanely high water bills. And in the summer months, my water bill is always hundreds of dollars, and I have a very small yard. So I think for most residents, we look at it and go, yeah, of course we want that, that's fantastic. But to your same point, I think it's even more advantageous knowing that it will help secure future water for the city, and it's really necessary across the board. So definitely support.
I guess also my other point, going back to what Laura said, I mean, here we are, we're going to purchase property, now we're going to have to maintain it. Sometimes maintenance doesn't always go according to plan in the city. We always have some issues that my concern is can we maintain it? Do we have the adequate staff and the adequate personnel to properly maintain this system? I don't want to say 5 years from now we go back, all our infrastructure is falling apart because we couldn't properly maintain it. That's my big concern. I mean, right now I kind of feel, and this is just my personal opinion, that maintenance is not getting adequately addressed now. If we can't adequately maintain what we have now, who says we're going to be able to adequately maintain it a couple years down the road?
Well, the whole situation is, a bad situation, and the area is already looking bad, and I think the residents are looking to us to make things better for them, and I don't want to say, yeah, we're going to make things better for you guys, and then to have, a more of an eyesore, more of a problem than what they already have now. So that's where I'm going with my concerns. I think it's great. I think if we can get non-potable through there and service this community like they've been promised for 17 years, I think that's absolutely fabulous. I don't want to say we want to promise you guys that this is what you're going to have, and then that's not what they're going to have, or that's what they're going to have for the first year or two, and then it's going to be a shabby mess that is out there.
Absolutely.
Typical.
And I agree wholeheartedly with that, particularly because of the potential build out on the other side, that will become kind of a prime opportunity for people to be more in that space, and I definitely have concerns over maintenance, so.
Well, Jim, I think we got direction. I think we do want to move forward and hear more about it. I hate to cut anybody else off that wanted to. We have 3 things we have to get to here tonight, and we're already 15 minutes past. So unless anybody has anything.
All I just want to add, I agree with what they mentioned with Laura, Mark, and Amanda. Yes, maintenance is a big, huge issue. Considering the history, we definitely want to make sure that we ensure that we can maintain it and allow them to have a system that's fully functioning, you know, for now and the future, but also being able to address concerns and being very transparent on what is happening and explaining every step of the way. And I know we've tried every single meeting that we've had, and we've elaborated. We've tried to definitely kind of lessen, use the least amount of verbiage that may not be as easy to understand for the residents. But I think if we continue just to ensure that we give them the information they need, and then, like she had mentioned, Amanda had mentioned, I'm sorry, it was Laura. It seems as though they still are, there's concerns that have not been exactly addressed or clarified. So let's continue to do that, and then I'm for this project.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you,
Next item on the agenda is the revised North Suburban Metropolitan District Service Plan.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a potentially large project that'll take some time to develop. Dixie Water is a company, I think we all may know, most of us may know Rod Guerreri, who's a longtime development partner with Evans. And so he has kind of a new vision for property that he owns in Evans. And due to some acquisitions that he's made in the last couple of years, it's actually a large part of South Evans. So it's exciting to hear and think about what that future could be. One of the first steps in moving toward that vision would be an amendment to a now decade or so old metropolitan district that's currently in place. Rod and his company have talked to us about some changes, and really it's really a recasting of that entire metro district. It'll take some time to bring back to you, but Rod asked, and we agreed, would be good to give him a few minutes to just kind of start sharing that vision with the council for where he'd like to go. The staff still has some questions that we're working through in terms of the financial plan that's associated with that vision and some transportation things. That'll take a little time to get back to you, but we did want to allow Rod a few minutes to just kind of share that vision. So sorry I took your time, but 12 and a half minutes or so is your time. So this is Rod Guerreri.
Is this
Clicker, you got it.
do you have a red thing by chance?
There is on there if you, I think the red button,
Oh, cool.
it's hard, it's not a great
Cool.
one.
All right. Well, members of council and mayor, thank you. So as we're working through this, some of the development property, we've started working with staff on the development plan. So we're gonna start bringing some of this stuff forward. As Jim mentioned, the Metro District, so I wear 2 hats. One is one of the principals with Dixie Water, and I got a partner here, Bear, and then we got council for our district, for North Suburban. So we created the district clear back, I think it was 2007, and obviously the idea was a lot around the water and different things, and then the flood comes, different things moved, you can't develop what we thought we could, things like that. So one of the things we want to do is expand our district, and expanding the district on top of bringing this in, we're essentially trying to solve what you all have been talking about is one of the water problems. And so, in part of our company, we own a lot of water. We own a substantial amount of water. I'll get into this a little bit more, but each one of those spots on the map is where we own assets, actually own them today. They're all somewhat water related, where we can have water storage or senior water rights, that type of thing. But as developers, you put the developer hat on, it comes back to having water for development, and Evans sits in the area that's serviced by CBT, so CBT water. And so this is the CBT map, and I don't know how, if you all know everything about CBT, but I just thought I'd recap it. So everything essentially north of Boulder, Broomfield, and Brighton, clear up to Fort Collins, is reliant on this one system. So it's west slope water, comes over through a tunnel, drops into Estes, and then fills up a series of reservoirs, huge system. But it's essentially what everybody needs for growth. So a developer goes out, finds CBT shares, brings them to the city, and that's what happens. So as we started developing, not only Evans, but Firestone and other areas, we can't find the CBT shares. And then if you can find them, they're so expensive that it makes it hard to develop. So we came up with some ideas with our plan to start developing our own water source. And we're talking to a lot of other people, Central Weld, Firestones. It's a large project. But part of what we wanted to do was expand our district to include areas. You can see here, areas 2 and 3 are already in the city of Evans. And 4 is adjacent. We're probably gonna end up annexing that. It's literally touches the side now. And then we have some down here. So we're spread out, and our district is only in the city of Evans. We want to get out and I'll go through the different reasons, but to expand this, essentially the water system, not to build homes in other areas, but to expand the water system. So from a development standpoint, let me touch real quick. So on CBT, so when it was created back in 1922, there was a set amount of water. And obviously as development approaches, and it's just supply and demand, the prices go higher, there's less water. So one of the things they're talking about is NISP, and I think you guys participate in NISP, don't you, Jim?
Yes, sir.
So NISP is, there's basically, if it comes through, that black line there represents, it's about 51,000 acre feet of water. And even if that happens in the NISP system, it's still, you look at the growth, the potential, you still, in my opinion, need another water source. And that's essentially what we're going after. So a few years ago, we did a study, we had a study done. I don't think I'm happy to share this with any of you guys. It's essentially a study that we looked at. We wanted to determine how much growth is possible if you rely on the CBT system or if you don't. And so we studied the area, this area here. So basically Broomfield, Brighton, all the way up to Fort Collins, and then out to Fort Morgan. And so there are two things that I'm just going to point out about this study that are interesting. So this is the graph. The blue lines represent the price of CBT prices, of shares, price per share. And the red line represents the building permits in that study area. So one thing that's for sure is once CBT prices get up about 25,000 per share, the permits plummet. And I think it's just a function of the market. You can only pay so much for developers can only pay so much for the homes in that market. So that's one thing. And then here's the other one where they compared the two. So this is without, these are the number of new building permits. So without a new system, the average of 303 a year. With the new system, it jumps up over to here. So it was that type of stuff that we decided, okay, let's work on our own water source, especially since we own a lot of water rights. And so we started doing that, and it now comes, and this is the same map that's here. So, and we started buying water rights, and they're spread out, which isn't by choice, it's by where the water rights are located. So you have to go find them where they're located, and then, and so this is the system. So we have all these different places where we have assets. A lot of these will be water storage. We're going to mine the gravel. So you not only need the water, but you need the water storage. Some of them we're going to pipe. We've actually started this already, the easements. We've got about 39 miles of easements done on phase 1 of the pipeline. Again, all the assets we own, we've owned them for years and years, but they all have water. So it kind of creates this water concept. So one of the problems, just like the CBT system, the system's spread out. Starts on the west slope, there's tunnels through the Continental Divide, 4 or 5 different reservoirs, and then spreads out. It's the same with ours. It's literally water in different areas, storage in different areas by where you can do it. Our district is just now in the city of Evans limits. So the point of us expanding the district is so we can have the public side of, you know, essentially the water district, combine all of these into one package so we can make that work. So the other thing that really complicates it, I put the map on here, the same map, but these red points, so in addition to the assets being located in different areas, the red points are dry up points in the river. So these are, it has to do with water rights and water flow and the seniority of water. So in Colorado's waterlogged, which is very unique. So wherever there's one of these red points, it's a legal dry up in the South Platte River. So whoever owns those shares of the ditch at that point can literally sweep the entire ditch and it dries the river up. So what complicates it from a water project standpoint is being able to move water from its historical point of use back or get water, it's hard to get past them. And that's why you see where these dry up points, that's where a lot of our assets are when we started buying the water assets. We knew we needed the water and the water storage there. So essentially what we're doing is our district sets right here on one or on 2 of these. It's actually on 2 of the farms. We're probably going to add 4. It'll be probably new annexation. It's just a farm that's literally right on your very east edge. It sits right next to it. What we're wanting to do is expand the North Suburban Metro District, which is now just in Evans, to include, oops, I'm hitting the wrong button. To include the properties here at 5 and 6. So it basically it allows us to expand the district. Really what we're doing is capturing more of a tax base. The Title 32 district, it's a taxing authority. So as we expand it, we get a larger taxing base. Essentially, that helps subsidize. Ultimately, the cost of the water, it's got to be affordable to the developers that are going to be building here. And with this, it will, with the expansion, because we're able to collect other property taxes to help subsidize. So in essence, the new homeowner essentially is the one paying for the water. So it's got to be affordable. You got to get some of these subsidies in there and help through some of it to be able to pay to do a system like this. So that's essentially why we're trying to expand it, and then obviously with that we're doing all these new development plans as well.
So your plan for the Metro District expansion at this point is to include points 5 and 6?
Correct.
In the Metro District that you currently, in the boundaries
Right.
that you currently have?
Which obviously 5 and 6, it can't be contiguous to Evans, so we can't annex it. Right now, in our service plan for the current district that was set up in 2007, there's some, it has to be, the property has to be in the city of Evans, you know, annexation. If it's not, the city of Evans has the right to allow us to expand it, and we have to get your permission to do it. But there's no way that we could annex all the property from this point clear down to here. So it's like, so we're going through this other step where we have to get your permission to expand it. So we expand it, it keeps it all in one district. We could go set up another district, but we'd rather just keep it in one district. And it expands our taxing base, so we get some more tax revenue to help pay for some of this infrastructure. And eventually, I think long term, it's going to be an alternate water supply. So instead of CBT water that's very clean, so you can't mix it with a lot of the other stuff, our system will be based on native water. So a system that you can, your Godfrey shares, for example, Jim, you'd have been able to use those, you know, or any other water right. It just expands what you can do. It even gives other developers, instead of having to find CBT, they go find a ditch share, some Latham water, Godfrey water.
Mm-hmm.
It opens that up, which is a lot less than what the CBT is. So
just to finish from a staff and this side, we have a lot of questions. Scott Krob is at the table with us as we work with Rod and his team. They have drafted a Metro District amendment that we're studying, and so we have, I think, we've answered some of the questions, but not all of them yet. So we're not looking for any direction on yes, move forward or don't, as much as we just wanted to introduce the concept and hear any first questions that you want to make sure that we answer as we move forward.
I have a couple questions. Sure. So one, what is the main benefit to the city for this? And two, are we just talking about water storage, or are we also talking about treatment as well?
It'd be treatment as well. So think of it as, it's the first step to developing a new system, and for potable and non-potable. So you could have, obviously the source of the water is South Platte water. So it's great for non-potable because you don't have to treat it. But treating it, we want to get it to where it's potable as well. We essentially want to replace the CBT. So those are some of the things we're working with. So there would be a treatment plant. We contemplated, do we put the treatment plant, you know, at the number 4, or do we put it down here? There's a lot of things that go into it. Who else is going to participate? There's other municipalities that want to, you know, I think this takes a lot of people to do it. So, you know, do you pipe the raw water to this point and then have clean lines going, or Central could deliver it or something, or do you have the treatment plant here? So those are things that still need to be worked out. The biggest benefit to the city is that alternate water source that I think wouldn't have a cap on it, because as long as you can find ditch water, you know, and there's farmers that want to sell and the farmers that don't, but you have the entire South Platte River now as the raw water source that could go into the system. And the cost of it, our cost, and even building the new pipeline and everything, it's a lot lower. You go back down to where developers, they're paying a $18,000 to $20,000 type fee for water versus 35 or 40, which is where CBT is, if you can find it.
I think the simple fact that you're creating a water treatment plant, and then you're able to treat, you know, your water, or like you said, the Godfrey or Lathan water.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing, because then that will be, people can, in essence, buy water at a lower cost, but then you would also be able to treat it.
Correct.
And that's the hard part, is finding someone that will treat that specific type of water.
Right. And that's there's been a lot of people, just like myself, that have been trying to solve this CBT water. The hardest part is the quality of it. CBT is 50 TDS water. TDS is total dissolved solids. South Platte River is 1,200, and drinking water standards are 500. So you got to take a lot out, which is usually a reverse osmosis plant, but reverse osmosis is so expensive because of the brine. So one of the ways is pre-treatment, and then you blend it. So we have some clean water sources that's very clean and pure, so you can blend whatever you can't treat. You basically, what reverse osmosis does is get rid of the TDS. Blending it does the same thing. So, and that's the way it's going to have to be done. And I don't think we're ever going to get to 50 TDS, but you're going to get within drinking water quality standards. And then I think earlier, what you guys had talked about, the earlier subject, non-potable, you can have a dual system. If you do non-potable and you want all your new homes to be on it, you're essentially going to have 2 taps. You have a potable tap and a non-potable tap. And so I think the same system, you know, it's like, think of a reservoir there collecting the water and supply the non-potable, then the other one runs through the treatment. So it's something that I think could get off the reliance of CBT, probably even off I don't know how your thing with Greeley works, but your water goes to Greeley first and then back, right?
Treated by Greeley.
Yeah, so I think it could get you off that as well. So yes, that's a long answer to your question.
And before we have storage or any other kind of structure there, it would have to be excavation for the rocks out of the gravel excavation.
Yes, they're eventually you
So
can.
that's what would affect the neighbors in that area first, would be excavation of the gravel.
Yeah, so some of them aren't in the same located, like are you saying the Evans residence?
Yeah, that lived on south of the rivers, you're south of the river,
Right,
right?
right, yeah, so
the-
south
the
and
people
north, so
along
yeah,
394, that's what would affect them.
Right.
Primarily first is there
Correct.
would be gravel excavation there.
yeah, they'll eventually, I think gravel mining in in that area is probably 10 to 12 years out. But you don't have to, you can go in and do the slurry wall first, which is a way you basically, essentially build a wall underneath down to bedrock. Separates the alluvium, the water flowing underground from not. So you build that and then you pump the water out, now you've sealed it, you can still store water in there. So you don't have to mine it before you store it. And that's what we're doing. The market, for somebody to mine it, you just gotta wait for the market to, nobody's interested in mining this stuff yet. They're looking ahead that far, but, I think Vara purchased some or something, but I think the plans are out of the way, so. But you're correct, that when we eventually wanna mine the gravel out to make more storage. So that would affect people when that mining happens.
And I've heard that proposal about 10, 15 years ago, probably from you.
Right.
Possibly. It's just not viable because you can't, there's not a market for the gravel, It's a very ambitious project on your part. We definitely need more water storage facilities in Colorado.
Definitely. It's a lot that leaves the state.
Other questions or comments from Mr. Gregory? I think it sounds really interesting. It's a really cool looking project, so look forward to learning more about it.
All right,
Well,
wonderful.
thank you so much for your time tonight.
Sure. Or you can send it to me
okay.
and we'll get it out to them.
Thank you again for
Thanks.
being here.
Thank you guys. Thanks for the time.
Next item on the agenda, future growth and land use planning priorities.
I couldn't have teed that up any better. We do have a lot of growth happening in the northern Colorado region, like council knows. We also know that we need to begin in earnest our negotiations with other communities and our efforts to better define our growth opportunities in various areas. One step in that process will be updating our comprehensive plan, and another, which we're planning to do over the next year and a half or so, another will be in having negotiations and actually working on specific boundary issues with 4 to the west and potentially to the south. Tonight, we're really just we're just bringing an update on those issues and looking for your concurrence or direction with our focus to the west. I'll share that. But I would like to ask our senior planning manager, Ann Bess Johnson, to just give a little bit more than that on the planning tools and where we're going. She has 15 minutes.
Thank you. Well, maybe I can help gain a little bit of time too. So in your packets this evening, you have a lot of amazing maps, and I would like to introduce you to Anna Jarab, and she created all of these maps for you tonight. So she and I worked on them together, and she just did a great job. So as Jim was mentioning earlier, we at the city of Evans and northern Colorado is really experiencing a lot of growth. The Larimer and Weld County MSA are one of the fastest growing MSAs in the nation. And so, as you know, you've seen a lot of land use applications in the past 9 months come before you. And I think, Jim, you had calculated there are about 2,000 residential lots or units that are either in the planning works or have been created just in less than a year. So, also, as you know, the comprehensive plan is a strategic plan. It is created to form the vision of how you want the community grow and how the citizens of Evans feel like they want their community to grow. So we're going to quickly go through some of the maps that have been provided. And the first one in your packet is the future land use map. And that is just based on the comprehensive plan. The second one, and that's up right now. So what you see right here is land that Evans in 2014 determined that this is where you're going to grow. And there is some of the parcels are already in the city limits, other parcels are outside the city limits. And for those that are still in unincorporated Weld County, it was an exercise of how does the city and the citizens view these unincorporated areas fitting in to the puzzle piece of Evans. And so then on the next map, this is the current zoning and the growth area. So you can see the area in pink up above is Greeley. You have Kersey to the east. You have Gilchrist and LaSalle to the south and southeast. Milliken to the west. And so the areas within that lime green boundary is the comprehensive planning area for Evans. And the areas that are not colored within that comprehensive plan area are still in unincorporated Weld County. So it's an option for future annexation and growth per the last strategic plan. So the next map that we're going to take a look at are the comprehensive planning boundaries of all of the communities around Evans. So you see Greeley, they have a respectful line going across, and Kersey, there's a small area of overlap, as is with LaSalle. Gilchrist is to the south. Milliken, they jumped into our boundary a little bit with the Flack annexation a couple of years ago. But as you can see, we're all pretty good, and so it really provides an opportunity for regional cooperation as well as to plan those edges where we're coming up right to somebody's property, not property, but boundary. So we can talk about, do we want common design standards? How does Evans want to grow in those areas? Is there a common vision that we can be working at so that we can have regional cooperation in planning for joint development to come? The next map that we're going to look at is, this is the recognized urban growth boundary map with Kersey, Evans, and Greeley. It's that area in the blue dotted line. This is map 5 in your packet. And so this is an area where Greeley, Evans, and Kersey drew their line in the sand. Where are we really going to grow based on service provision? Where can we not grow? And between the three communities, recognizing each other's boundaries. And then the next map is map 4 in your packet. And just as Evans has planned, or this is map 3, sorry, just as Evans has planned for growth, we have an intergovernmental agreement with Weld County. And that intergovernmental agreement is based on statute indicating that you can go 3 miles outside your current boundary, and that's where you have the potential to grow. Well, obviously, we have some roadblocks there. Milliken and Greeley and other communities in the area.
Taking over.
Yeah, watch out, Evans is coming. But what this does is this really does, again, look back to the maps that we saw a little bit before, these comprehensive plan maps for our neighbors. And yes, we're so thankful and grateful that Weld County sends us referrals for everything happening in that boundary area, but is it realistic? And we need to take a look at what is everybody doing around us and where are those edges of potential. Some people could see them as conflicts, and we're just going to see those as opportunities to work together. But yes, this is a loud and proud Evans Here We Come map. So then on the next map.
Not a real plan for anybody out there.
Yes, not our real intentions. And so this next map, just as we have planned for our future with Weld County, everybody else has too. So everybody else has their loud and proud map as well. So you see Greeley's, Milliken's, LaSalle, Gilchrist, and Kersey, and then you see Evans in there. And we focus on those communities because they're our neighbors, but Milliken has Johnstowns and Plattevilles, and Greeley has Windsor, and so everybody else has some of those areas of overlap as well. But it really identifies that opportunity for us to be working collaboratively with our neighbors. So those are the maps in your packets, the significance of those maps. Staff really in the past, we have received some interest in annexation from folks and some opportunities through the Weld County referral system because of our cooperative planning agreement. And staff is really looking for city council's direction because it's our opinion that we can't go north. We really can't go east because we already, or when we do go east, it's going to be under the guise of our agreement with Kersey, Evans, and Greeley. Randy calls that the KEG agreement. And so our opportunities are to go west, and our opportunities are somewhat to also go south. So we are looking for opportunities to negotiate with our neighboring communities from you all and some direction from you all saying, yes, you know, go forth and work together as a regional collaboration effort. And then also to focus our efforts on those southern and mostly to the west, those properties as well. And this, again, as Jim mentioned, it really will form a good foundation for how we're going to proceed with updating the comprehensive plan in the next few years.
And council will have several more work sessions as we get closer to that comprehensive plan launch, but there is activity happening, so we wanted to just come with this high-level overview tonight and seek your concurrence to work with our neighbors, specifically to the west, but also be open to things happening around us, and that's our request tonight.
Yeah, thank you. Questions or comments?
I just have a quick comment. I mean, I totally agree and move forward with this. However, I don't see why we can't go east. I mean, Kersey's already encroached on our boundary and taken some of our land. Milliken has already taken some of our land. Why can't we?
So if we can,
Take our land, why can't we?
yeah. Anna, I don't know if we can go to map 5.
While they're doing that, I'll just say, I think we could look, and we will, of course, continue to look and be aware, but we are also looking for some priority for where to work, because we just don't have the resources to work on all fronts at the same time.
Because it looks to me on these maps that while elders are all expanding and so is Evans, it seems like Evans is actually not, it seems like Evans is getting the roll into the deal. And it looks like Milliken is expanding quite a bit. It's almost as large as Greeley's. Gilchrist has gotten large. And then Evans is right here. It seems like Evans is the smaller one out of, well, Gilchrist, but it seems like Evans is like actually the smaller portion of the boundary than the other communities are.
So on this particular map, the area within the blue dotted line that's green, that's where Evans agreed with Greeley and Kersey. That's our growth area. And then the area that's just south and east of that blue line that's still green, that's where we're also saying, hey, this is our comp plan area, and Evans can grow there. Kersey has a pretty, their comprehensive plan area, and there is a little area of overlap up there. It's the yellow and the green area. Really, there isn't any reason why Evans would want to go north and crossing Highway 34. But truly, if anybody proposed an annexation or we've got a referral from Weld County in that area, you bet we're going to take that seriously.
I'd like to see us look out west,
And
mainly
south.
for a couple reasons. Katie Press, who we hired to be our advisor to tell us where businesses were gonna go, said it's gonna be out west. And that's where our next, we need sales tax, we need businesses to come to town. I think out west is where we need to go. I think we need to grab that land up.
Right.
And when it does develop out there, we got a huge neighborhood coming out there, businesses are gonna follow, and we wanna keep going that direction. So I would say focus west, and I think we need to do it now, sooner rather than later.
I agree with
Yeah,
that, but
mean,
I
it looks
also
like the
feel
way
as
that
though
everybody's-
going south as well, so like southwest, southwest.
I've been hearing a lot and reading a lot about them building up between 257 to our area. And you guys see, we all see Greeley's moving further and further and further west. And we hear people, I'm from West Greeley, whatever, you're from Greeley. But, it's one of those things where they're building and the houses are going to follow. I've been hearing about shopping following. I've been hearing about them selling the land. South of 34 and east of 257, I've been hearing about development and not just houses, but shopping and everything, because they're talking about people living up here because our cost is better than a lot of areas. And even though it's kind of between Loveland and Greeley, they're talking about it being a good area because you're 25 or 85, which one do you want to take down? So for me, I agree, I think we need to be looking west, at least to 257, yes.
Well, and another reason, we are one of 9 cities that just joined the Freedom Parkway Coalition.
Exactly.
That means
Yes.
at least 9 of us know that that road is gonna turn into something big someday.
Right.
So we need to grab it while we can.
Yeah, we need
Agree.
to go out as far west as we can.
Yeah, and I think if you look at development that's happened across the Front Range, and you really focus in on Johnstown being a great example, moving west, hitting those main thoroughfares. I mean, Johnstown Plaza, Thompson Crossing, those metropolitan districts have really changed the face of Johnstown. And I think if we took advantage of that same westward thinking, I'll say, and went that way, that really expands south also to what we're saying. So
Yeah, that's what-
you can take Freedom Parkway and go all the way to I-25. And I just think, I do that a lot to go to work. And if we do that,
Not
then
right now.
that's gonna be great. I know. Don't remind me.
I'd rather us get it than
Faster
someone
even on
else.
That way, even with the construction.
So,
Yeah, I
West and
certainly
south for
haven't
me.
heard of anyone, any property owners to the east of us that are interested in being annexed into the city for development.
True, but why
Western.
let someone else encroach on it if it's in our boundary?
I understand that.
Jim, does that give you some direction?
Yes, thank you, Council.
Awesome. We got a
More
few
to come.
minutes. Chief, can you keep it to 8? Item on the agenda is a report on fireworks from Chief Brandt.
Chief Grant.
Chief has new knees for anyone who hasn't.
Pair of brand new knees.
Very nice.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I almost feel like I have to reintroduce myself. I've been gone so long.
it's the outfit that's really throwing me.
Well, I'm on light duty for months. I don't even get to wear a uniform. So I'll keep it brief. 4th of July enforcement strategy this year mirrored pretty much what we've done historically in terms of our strategies, tactics, and objectives. So as in previous years, we focused in the days and weeks leading up to the 4th of July on the education side of the equation. Officers were handing out pamphlets. We were doing stuff on social media, advising people, what was legal, what was not, the fines, that sort of stuff, thinking that that would be our best strategy to deter some of the illegal fireworks. And we did not put out the signboards this year, and that was not an intentional strategy. That was an oversight, which I accept responsibility for. There was just missed it, and it won't happen again. They seemed to be pretty effective last year, and it was just an oversight. So we did, like in other years, we staffed up in the days leading up to July 4th and canceled some leave, as we do every year on July 4th. So we had full staffing. We had a total of, I think, 15 overtime shifts for officers to pick up during that time. We were able to fill 11 of those. We put out 2 officer cars and unmarked cars from 7P to 1A each night. Interestingly, this year, the days leading up to the 4th of July were exceptionally slow in terms of calls for service, right? So from June 30th to July 3rd, I think we had a total of 12 calls for fireworks, which is very unusual. And then even the days after, the 5th and 6th, we only had 20 calls. But July 4th, if you were around, you probably heard it. It rocked. In terms of total calls, we're pretty consistent from the last few years. Last several years, we've had a high of about 115 calls around the 4th of July to about 93. This year we had 99. So fairly consistent. We took a more, stringent zero tolerance approach with the officers. And basically my instruction was, if you have probable cause, make the arrest. That resulted in a total of 16 summonses issued this year, which is fairly high for this kind of an offense. It's very difficult to establish probable cause. But the officers, I think, were fairly aggressive this year. This just calls for service by district. As you can see, District 3 has the highest calls for service historically. That's the yellow. We're fairly consistent in terms of calls. So there's our summonses issued, higher than normal. I've spoken to our municipal judge prior to the holiday, and he was very willing to enforce that $500 minimum. And I think that may send a strong message, and we'll evaluate that moving forward and see how that was done. So we spent a total of about $3,600 in overtime this year, and very, very little in terms of, the pamphlets and stuff. It only costs a few dollars to print those up and get them distributed, and we kept them in, businesses and that sort of thing as we've done in the past. So that's kind of the overview. Be happy to answer any questions. I know we talked before the meeting, and we're still having some fireworks. Officers are aware of that. They're out there looking for them as we speak. So they're keeping up.
So Chief, I do have a question. A couple of people have asked me this question. I know officers say they have to actually see the fireworks in order to write the citation. They have to actually.
Sort of. Yes. Mhm.
If a citizen sees it and they videotape it, can they provide that to an officer and say, look, this individual shooting off illegal fireworks, here's what's going on? Can the officer write those individuals a citation based on a video provided from a citizen?
Yes, so long as that citizen is willing to testify in court that they took the video. And that's where we run into problems. It's neighbors testifying against neighbors, and it makes it very awkward. So a lot of people don't want to sign complaints. But yes, the short answer, council member, is yes.
Okay.
What is the reason that Ward 3 historically has like the highest volume of calls? Do you feel is it because, like for example, other cities butt up to that ward or, or the county, and so they don't understand? Because I know, there's certain areas that's Weld County, and so people don't understand and they think it's Evans. Do you think that plays a role in those numbers? Or?
It could. I haven't done any studies to research why that is, but historically, Ward 3 has had the higher calls.
I'm just kind of curious to see, because what if it's Weld County and they're like, hey, they're like, doing illegal stuff, but they can't, they're Weld County.
Yeah, and it's up to dispatch to
Right.
differentiate the address and make sure. And our goal was to respond to every single call for service.
It's
And
an incredible job. Thank you.
yeah, I think the boys and girls did a good job this year.
They do.
So you said you spent $3,600 in overtime for that day, and yet we got 16 calls at $500, so $8,000 in, so it seems like it's well worth it for us to spend it on overtime.
Yeah, I think the operation at least paid for itself plus this year. Yes.
And I think next year, maybe, we can do the boards, again, I was disappointed not to see the boards, because it really, I think, put a message out there, but also maybe, flashing on those boards that it's at least a $500 fine. And, we're gonna be strict. I think that we'll start to get the message out a little bit more too.
Yes, and we may be discussing even amping up that fine minimum a little bit. I know I've had conversation with the judge about that already, and he's actually driving that.
Oh, nice.
We got, I know in my neighborhood, we got some of the same people every year, some of the violators putting off the big mortars. But I sure wish I could catch that one on video.
We would like to too.
Well, when they randomly set them off at 2 or 3 in the morning, it's awful hard to take care of.
Doing.
Chief, if it is a second or third time offender, is the fine higher? Or is it, okay, good.
Yes, and because the maximum fine for these offenses is about $2,600.
Okay.
So the judge has the option to continue to ramp it up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Thank
Chief.
you.
Appreciate it.
Taking
Jim, I'm
time.
gonna ask you to do Heritage Days at your park. Go, let's break and get the meeting.